If you've been lifting for a while but feel stuck, like no matter what you do, your physique isn't changing, don't worry, you're not alone. After my newbie gains, I plateaued hard. But after applying a handful of research-backed strategies to my training and diet, I was able to gain a legit 20 pounds in 16 months. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to make that happen for yourself. I'll break down 5 specific strategies that helped reignite my growth to help me build muscle faster than I ever could before. And if you're a beginner in the gym that wants to accelerate their growth without wasting time on wondering if what you're doing is even working in the first place, be sure to download my free guide, the exact 90-day plan that I use to build muscle and get ripped. You can grab it for free with the link in the description below. The first topic I wanted to cover is how to optimize your training program to maximize hypertrophy. I used to be obsessed with just focusing on progressive overload. All I want to do is chase more reps and more weight at any cost. The problem? I started cheating reps, cutting depth, and using excess momentum. But then I came across a growing body of research on the concept of stretch-mediated hypertrophy, which is the idea that muscles grow more when they're trained in their fully lengthened positions. One study on biceps compared preacher curls and incline curls. And preacher curls, where the biceps are under more stretch at the bottom position, led to an additional 150% growth compared to incline curls. And another study showed that overhead extensions beat out tricep press downs, again because of that lengthened position. So to apply this to my program, I structured my workouts around exercises that maximize this concept. I started doing behind the body bicep curls on my pull days, seated leg curls for hamstrings, and glute-focused Bulgarian split squats on my posterior-focused leg days, and then wide stance cable Y raises for my side delts on push day. I even reduced my weights by about 10 to 20%, added an extra pause at the bottom, and focused on a full range of motion throughout the entire movement. So once I shifted from lifting heavier and chasing more reps to finding new ways to progressive overload, I started to notice visible changes immediately. So not only did my form improve, but my strength continued to gradually increase more than it did when I was just focusing on chasing more weight and more reps. And this also decreased my risk for injury because I was performing the reps with a more controlled cadence. This in turn prevented me from putting myself in a compromised position. So if you could optimize your hypertrophy going beyond chasing more weight and more reps, how does intensity factor into this? As important as exercise selection and execution are, they mean absolutely nothing if you don't apply yourself. So here's the truth. I thought I was training hard, but in reality, I was just selling myself short. Research shows that even some experienced lifters tend to stop their sets 1 or 2 reps too early, sometimes even more than that. I started forcing myself to train 1 to 2 reps short of muscular failure. And I mean real failure, not just when it started to feel uncomfortable and tiring, but when my muscles were short of truly giving out despite my best effort. To do this, I made 2 key changes. Number 1 is mental focus. Before every set, I'd close my eyes, block out every distraction, and completely lock in. No more just jumping into every set on autopilot. I needed to be aware of what I did last time and what I need to do this time to surpass that. Number 2 was a complete mindset shift. I stopped fearing the pain. Instead, I started welcoming it. That discomfort I felt was getting me closer and closer to those last few reps. And those last few reps are the only reps that actually build muscle. Everything before merely exists just to get to that point. Once I applied both of those, my training intensity immediately shot up, and so did my progress. Now that you're not just training more intelligently, but more intensely, is it okay to go all out all the time? While in hindsight, that seems like a valuable strategy to streamline your gains, but the reality is you have to prioritize recovery, especially as you age. When I was younger, I could train 6 to 7 days per week with no issues. But once I started training harder, getting older, and factoring in all the stressors of life, I hit a brick wall. My strength plateaued, the quality of each one of my workouts started to decline, and I slowly lost the drive to strive for more progress. I had to go back to the drawing board. How could I find ways to train less, but keep the quality of my workouts high enough so I was still making consistent gains, even with less time in the gym? So instead of training 6 days a week with high volume, I decided to shift my training plan to 4 days a week with less sets, more intensity. I only did 2 sets per exercise that I was doing, and I focused mostly on compound lifts and did some isolation work near the end. I occasionally threw a set training to failure here and there, but I don't think it's necessary to train the all-out failure for every single workout that you do. However, if you don't occasionally push yourself to that point, it could be hard to truly determine what 1 rep short of failure actually feels like. Because the last thing that you want is to think you're training 1 rep short of failure, when in reality, it's more like 2 or 3 short of failure. But once you do reach that level of confidence where you're certain you're training 1 rep short of failure, or actually training to all-out failure, you're not going to need as many sets to have a successful workout. In fact, if you're truly training that hard all the time, you'll need more time to properly recover so you can come back to your next session at 100% and be able to gauge your progress. You'll want to have the exact same starting point. That way, when you do come back to your next workout and your focus is on progressive overload and you're trying to add an additional rep or go up slightly in weight, you'll know for a fact that you've truly recovered. So once it is time to test your strength, you'll maximize your chances of being able to progress. Without proper recovery, you're more likely to hit a plateau. And the reason for that is because muscle isn't built inside the gym. It's built during proper recovery. If your nervous system is fried, your sleep is trash, or you're under eating, your gains are going to stall no matter how hard you think you're training. So once I made the switch to training less days per week with more intensity and then prioritizing recovery on my off days, I've had more energy, more focus, and even faster recovery. I actually look forward to workouts again, and my progress is better than ever. And speaking of making sure that you're not under eating, does that mean more food leads to better recovery? If you want to build muscle, you ideally want to be in a calorie surplus, but that doesn't mean you need to eat everything in sight to make gains. I used to swing back and forth between cutting down to get super lean and then bulking up and being too fat for my liking. And in doing so, it always held me back because of the time I had to spend cutting. I ended up committing to what people call a dreamer bulk. Basically, I ended up eating well over what you actually need to maintain a proper calorie surplus to maximize muscle gains. In doing so, I gained excess fat that I wouldn't have gained otherwise had I stuck to just eating 200 to 300 calories above maintenance. But after months of meticulous cutting, I knew this time something had to change. I did a slow and strategic bulking phase. I kept my calories only 10 to 15% above maintenance. So instead of eating in excess of 3,000 calories like I was before, considering the fact that I was just coming off a longer cut and I weighed a little bit less than I did before, I started off at about 2,600 calories, and by the time my bulk ended, I only hit 3,000 instead of going above that. I didn't want to go up an extra 50 to 100 calories every week just because. I decided to stick around at the calories I was at until my weight plateaued for at least a week, and only then did I decide to increase my calories, but I didn't increase them by more than 50 to 100 at a time. I made sure I wasn't gaining any more than a half pound per week, because I knew at the point that I was at in my lifting journey, anything more than a half pound of body weight per week would lead to excess fat gains that I could otherwise avoid if I wasn't increasing my calories at such a level. And instead of relying on me eating out to hit my calorie goal, which could lead to me improperly tracking how many calories I'm eating due to me not being able to monitor and manage exactly what I'm putting into my system, as opposed to me focusing on whole foods where I'm able to weigh every single ingredient out and track it accordingly. I also prioritized on eating at least 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight and making sure that the protein came from high quality amino acid rich sources. Once I had that covered, I just filled the rest of my diet with high quality carbs and fats. So one study compared fast and slow bulks where one group ate way above maintenance and another group only ate a couple hundred calories above maintenance, maybe 10 to 15% more. And what they found was that the group that ate significantly above maintenance gained 5 times the amount of fat than the calculated group that only ate 10 to 15% above maintenance, while only gaining a microscopic amount of muscle. Not even enough to be visibly different. But yeah, by the end of my bulk, I still did gain some fat, and it was a little bit mentally tough seeing some of my definition fade. but that's the price you have to pay for a successful bulk. It doesn't need to get out of control, but if you really do want to see results, you have to get comfortable with the fact that it's okay to bulk beyond the point of not being able to see your abs anymore. It's a long-term investment, and once you finish your next cut, it'll definitely pay off. I stopped cutting every few months, and I started giving my body enough time to grow without the unnecessary fat gains. Muscle gain is a very slow process, especially once you're past the newbie gain stage. During your first year of lifting, you'll end up gaining about 50% of the total muscle that you could gain during your lifetime of lifting. And after that, it drops by about 50% a year, meaning by the end of your second year, you will have gained 75% of your total natural muscle. And this is assuming you stay natty throughout the entire process while training consistently for most of the year. Gaining 20 pounds took me nearly a year and a half once I was past my newbie gain stage. And to be honest, a lot of that wasn't even muscle. But you have to zoom out and think of the big picture. Again, you don't want to be the guy that cuts the second they start to lose their ab definition. If your goal is to build muscle, your body's not going to look the way you want it to unless you have that muscle on you. So work on shifting your mindset to adhere to your long-term goals, not just how you feel in the present moment. Make sure you embrace the entire process, the good and the bad. You have to be willing to stay patient because like anything in life, fitness isn't a linear journey. There's going to be plenty of ups and downs and zigzags. It isn't just a straight line to the top. You have to be willing to commit to the long haul, even if you have a few roadblocks along the way. So if you've been struggling to gain size lately and you're still relatively a beginner, don't just assume it's your genetics or you're close to your maximum potential. Sometimes the answer is just recalibrating your program, pushing a little bit harder, understanding the importance of recovery, and giving all of those changes time to set in. These 5 changes helped me break through years of stagnation and finally gain an additional 20 pounds in just a year and a half. And if you found this video helpful and want a more thorough explanation on all of these concepts while having direct access to my support, be sure to join my free school community, Muscle Truth University, with the link in the description below. I'll catch you guys on the next one.